Welcome, everybody. I'm Angela Kirstenbrock, president of the Community College Baccalaureate Association, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our second webinar that's sponsored by ECMC. And we have three really fantastic panelists who are practitioners as well as leaders and researchers, and who also can talk the talk and walk the walk, so that you'll get the real ideas of how this community college baccalaureate legislation expanded. So one of the things that's happened, because I think a little bit in part because of COVID, has been expansion of community college baccalaureates in the United States. Part COVID, part social justice initiatives, part more awareness of equity, and I think also because the colleges that are doing community college baccalaureates are doing such a great job and keeping the data and keeping the promises that they've made to their communities, that states have been able to expand their baccalaureate. So I want to introduce you today to our panelists, and I'll let them also introduce themselves as well. So the first we have Dr. Jamilyn Penn, and I first met Jamilyn Penn in Seattle. Yes, Jamilyn is the Director of Transfer Education and Washington State Board at the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Education. Jamilyn, hello, glad that you're here.
Thank you.
And then we have Rick Woodfield. Dr. Woodfield is the Chief Academic Officer for the Ohio Association of Community Colleges, and we are delighted that he's here with us today.
Happy to be here.
Oh, and then we have Landon Pirius. How did I do, Landon?
That was good.
That was good. Dr. Landon Pirius. He is the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs of the Colorado Community College System. So welcome, panelists. Thank you for your time and for agreeing to get on another Zoom call. I think we're a little bit zoomed out, but I really appreciate that that you agreed to be with us today. So let's get started without any further delays so that we can get the most from these panelists who have graciously given their time. So we've invited our colleagues who are in the trenches at states where baccalaureate expansion has occurred over this legislative session and have been really part of the leadership team that make that happen. So I'm going to start with you, Jamilyn. Jamilyn, could you tell us what happened in Washington State this legislative session?
Absolutely.
Hi there. I'm on my laptop with my next meeting, but it said the installation failed.
Oh, okay.
It says I can re-enter it. There's retry, but I didn't know if you.
Okay, I think she's okay.
Okay,
Okay, Jamilyn.
No worries. Angela, thank you so much for having me here. What a great opportunity to share some information about things that are happening in Washington State, and also for me to learn from the other panelists about what's happening in their area. As you indicated, my name is Dr. Jamilyn Penn, and I serve as Director of Transfer Education at the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, which is in Washington State, the upper left, right, part of the country. And I've been at that in my role for a little over 2.5 years, about 2.5 years. In the recent legislative session in Washington State, the 2020-21 legislative session, as it is applicable to applied baccalaureate degrees or bachelor's degrees, because we've expanded how we talk about things in Washington State. During the last legislative session, our legislators voted to allow our community and technical colleges to expand opportunity to offer Bachelor of Science in Computer Science degrees. So this is a difference in that we had one college in our sector, Bellevue College, through a pilot opportunity 5 years ago. The legislature offered an opportunity for Bellevue College to offer the Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. They've held their own with it. Students have entered the program. We've had graduates out of that program, and it's a mainstay. And so this legislative session, we have 34 community and technical colleges. So Bellevue already had that opportunity to offer the Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. The recent legislation allows or permits the remaining colleges to offer
All
Bachelor
of them.
of Science in Computer Science degrees. And so what that means for the landscape in Washington State is that we have, with our applied baccalaureate degrees, we are well over 130 applied baccalaureate degrees in so many disciplines. And now colleges, as of December 1st of 2021, they will be eligible to apply to offer a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, those remaining colleges. So that's what has happened with recent legislation.
Oh, thank you, Jamilyn. So you said a couple of really important things that I want to make sure that we, really heard. One is you're changing the language about baccalaureates to bachelor degrees instead of applied bachelor degrees.
And we will have both, but as we market our program, if you were to come to our web page, it's a lot to say applied baccalaureate degrees and Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. And so what we've decided to do is to say these are the bachelor programs that we offer and to work accordingly. That is still conversation that we'll need to lean into with our four-year partners. We do have really good relationships with both our K through 12 and our four-year public and private institutions. And I think that they will align with and understand what we are attempting to do. But to put that banner up there with all of that, that's a mouthful. So at this juncture right now, the application will have that umbrella if you were to come to our website, and then we'll move from there. And the last thing I'll say in that regard is we're building this plane as we're flying it. And so even the website, it's trying to catch up with, I put some requests for some updates to the website just within the last week and a half. And that's not just a Jamilyn thing. We have to have the webmaster who updates and puts things. So we're transitioning, but that is the way that we will move forward.
This whole movement, community college baccalaureates, has really been transitioning for 20 years. And it just keeps, I think, evolving and getting better. Rick, do you want to talk about what happened in Ohio this year?
Absolutely. So I work for the Ohio Association of Community Colleges, which is a membership organization for our 23 community colleges in Ohio. About 5 or 6 years ago, we were granted permission through the Legislative Act to grant the Bachelor's of Applied Science. So a lot of the concern as we were getting new schools to begin that pathway into providing the bachelor degree, the community college, there was concern that the BSN didn't fit into that model very well. So there was some early indications when we got the BAS permission that the then chancellor did not want to entertain any notion of bachelor degrees in nursing at the community college. So as the tides change and attitudes and personnel change, there was some interest in the community colleges coming back to that legislation, which was really seen as a big challenge. So this year, that legislation did get brought back up. There was a number of bills that it was a part of. So specifically, our budget bill is where the bachelor degree in nursing was placed and was approved. So we were able to get specific language in that legislation to allow us to do the BSN. We are just on Friday at that point where the state will start entertaining the applicants for those degrees. So we're at the beginning part of that for nursing, but we've had about 5 years now. We have I think Lorain County Community College, I think was our first, and it's graduating its third class of BAS students this year.
Thank you, Rick. Jamilyn, there was a question.
I would say let's create something. I mean, there's the templates out there on the website that have the logo and everything. And Colleen just sent me something.
I think you might be in a different meeting. Jamilyn, there was a question in the chat room for you. So let's see if we can grab what that is.
Clarity around whether Washington Community College is now offering any baccalaureate degrees, or are the colleges limited in what baccalaureate degrees? No, there's not a limitation. In fact, it's an expansion. We will still be able to offer applied baccalaureate degrees to the extent that we have always. And that applied baccalaureate degree, that's including BSN degrees. I mean, all of that is within the scope of, and now more, not just one college in our sector, in our 34 community college system will be able to offer a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. Now the remaining 33 colleges will also be able to offer a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. So that's the new legislation. We're continuing what we've always done, and then we will add opportunities for colleges to offer the Bachelor of Science in Computer Science.
Thank you, Jamilyn. I appreciate that. Landon, do you want to talk about what happened in Colorado this year?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Just let me do a sound check first, since this is the first time. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so Colorado had another positive session for community colleges this past legislative session. This goes on back to 2014 when we first passed legislation authorizing community colleges to offer BAS, a Bachelor of Applied Science degrees in the state. And then in 2018, we got legislative approval to offer Bachelor of Science in Nursing degrees. Now this past session, how this one differs from 2014 is that the 2014 bill was fairly restrictive for Colorado and the community colleges here. The approval process was quite extensive. It would take many, many years to get some of these programs approved. And we had to essentially, our process, we had to ensure that the universities in the state did not object. So there was a vetting process through the universities essentially in order to get any BAS degree approved. As a result, we only have 8 BAS degrees in the state, and that's across our 13 colleges. And then of course the BSN, that's separate from that. The legislation this past session, though, removed that stipulation of a secondary approval beyond our board. So the universities no longer have a kind of a step in the approval process.
Wow.
And that also means that we can now create BAS degrees in areas that our students and our communities are asking for. Not that they weren't for the 8 that we have, but we were fairly limited in our choice because we could really, at the end of the day, only pick BAS degree areas where the universities weren't already in that space. And so they're good programs, dental hygiene and secure software development and water quality and a few others, but they're not the big programs that you might see in Washington. And we look at Washington and we look at Florida and we look at other states. They're not business administration or construction management or teacher preparation or some of those other ones that we think will really attract students and better serve our communities. So with that barrier now gone in legislation, we're working with the 13 colleges in the state to develop a strategic approach to how we're going, which programs we're going to offer collectively, and we're going to develop them together. So then the next, 2 to 5 years is going to be very interesting in Colorado as we start to expand our bachelor's degree footprint in the state and into areas that we think will be able to attract quite a few students and better serve our community.
Well, thank you. So, Landon, what I heard you say that I think is really important and different from maybe some of the other states is that Colorado no longer requires the notification or the approval of the state universities or regional universities before a community college can proceed with baccalaureate degree. Did I sum that up correctly?
There's still a notification process. Every institution in the state, whether you're a college or a university, when you get a new degree, there's a notification to the Colorado Department of Higher Education. So there's still a notification. What isn't there, though, is an additional step of vetting and an approval layer. And so that got removed. Our board, just like any other board in the state, the University of Colorado, Colorado State University, they all have governing boards. And those governing boards are able to approve degree programs without additional state oversight. essentially what we were asking was to treat us like everyone else and don't require our colleges to have additional state oversight where the universities and other institutions in the state no longer have that. So yes, we still have to say we've approved this program and this is going to be offered fall 2023, but there's no approval or vetting process. It's just simply a notification.
Wonderful. Oh, great. Congratulations. So Jamilyn, why was it so important to Washington to expand this legislation this time?
Right. So this is a really fascinating legislation in that it did not commence on the community and technical colleges did not initiate. That's what I should say. We were not the ones that actually initiated this move towards having the remaining colleges offer the Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. It was an industry partner. We have in Washington State a huge technology base of some really big names in business with Amazon and Microsoft and the like. And so this bill initially rolled out, it's Senate House Bill 5401, and Mike Potter put the legislation in the chat so that everyone can take a look at it. Thank you, Mike. But it was originally called the Amazon bill. And it was called the Amazon bill because Amazon was the one that stepped forward, one of the biggest, the biggest industry partner in our state, who said, hey, listen, legislative body, we have multiple legislators who rallied around this, but that entity brought the bill to fruition. And the reason is that looking at the technology sector in Washington State, they were saying we have more than 24,000 job openings in this industry for computer science, and most of those jobs will require a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree. And Washington State is not graduating enough students. So what's happening is that we are pulling students from international programs, or they're coming in from international, or they're coming from other states. And we have a charge in Washington State that we have a goal of reaching 70% of our constituents in Washington State, earning a baccalaureate degree and moving forward. It's quite lofty. So we weren't hitting the mark in any of those regards. And so our business leaders stepped forward and said, hey, listen, this is what needs to happen. And along with that, we realize that 4-year institutions have offered these programs, but capacity-wise, there may not be enough space, or there's not enough space at some of our 4-year institutions. And so we are going to look to the community and technical colleges for that lift. And that lift came for a variety of reasons. Our community and technical colleges are positioned around the state so that our place-bound students who would not normally be able to attend a 4-year institution, who have jobs, who may be incumbent workers, who can't just drop everything and move to be on campus, would have ample opportunity. And then we also had Bellevue College, who had demonstrated, based on the work that they had done, that this was a good opportunity or an idea. So it was really industry that led the charge, that had the communication with the legislators, and they took it up, both the House and the Senate. They really rallied around it. The bill came through quite clearly, almost at 100%. Had an opportunity to testify in both of those arenas. And really, the pushback came from our 4-year private institutions who said, wait a minute, what about us? We have capacity, we can do this. So we're excited in our sector, the community and technical colleges in Washington State. And we plan to make good on building opportunities for students to navigate our systems and to find opportunities in our Bachelor of Science in Computer Science programs. And I will end with this, with the understanding that there are some students who will always want that 4-year experience, that 4-year opportunity, far be it from us to stand in the way of that. And so I still collaborate with my 4-year partners on, we have in our state a DTA, a direct transfer agreement, for students who want to transition from our sector to four-year, but this will open up greater opportunities for more students. There's a question about equity and justice that comes up, and the legislation does call out specifically who we should target in building our programs and building capacity. So I'll wait and answer that in just a few minutes.
Jamilyn, thank you. Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, we're always talking about getting industry support to help you with your proposal. I mean, you all have gone, way beyond that with your industry really calling for it. What a tremendous vote of confidence in all of you. That's really wonderful. So Landon, how about you? How did this come about in Colorado? How and why, I guess?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my first answer, it's been an evolution since 2014. So 2014 was initially the BAS authorization, 2018 was the BSN, and then this most recent kind of expansion. For us, in 2018 was probably very similar to what Jamilyn was saying, and that we had a lot of industry partners who came to the table saying that yes, the four-year universities have bachelor's degrees in nursing, but we are not nearly producing enough nurses in the state in order to meet the demand. And specifically, we're not meeting the need in rural areas. So when we get to equity later on, there's absolutely a social justice component to our work. But there was also a rural inequity occurring as we were looking just at nursing, and it exists in teaching and other areas as well. And so we had a lot of data, a lot of industry partners who testified. We had students testifying, and that really helped move that in 2018. This last go around, it was nothing compared to 2018. 18 was a big political battle with the universities and others. And of course, we ended up on the winning side of that. But for this time, this particular language was tucked into almost a higher education omnibus bill. It was the bill that was actually bringing the federal dollars to higher education. And it had many, many components. And the initial, the people who wanted the bill were the Department of Higher Education. And their original reason for wanting the bill was in order to allow universities in the state to grant associate degrees, which in some states that already exists. It does not exist in Colorado. And it was in a very limited way. It was only for students who started at the universities, not for transfer students and other sorts of students. And of course, we didn't have a problem with that, but we saw that as an opportunity, be completely honest, if the universities are getting this, then we want this. And because it was so many things in that bill, it ultimately kind of passed without a lot of fanfare, but it did a lot. We had a lot of fanfare internal to our system because now we know all the doors that are opening up because it happened. So it wasn't a huge fight. It wasn't industry sponsored. It was tucked into a federal stimulus spending piece, and it kind of went through. But our reason for doing it is very similar to what we've heard. Is that our other institutions in the state are just not producing enough graduates in certain fields. And they also aren't touching all of the corners of the state of Colorado, in particular the rural communities. And so it was really, this was, and the other piece I'd mention is that it's also, because it's a BAS, we've made the argument all along, and we've designed our programs in this way that they are stackable. And stackable credentials on top of a certificate and an AAS to a BAS is a really hot topic in Colorado and in the legislature and with our workforce partners. So I think even had there been some sort of fight for this particular piece, I think we had a number of arguments in terms of service to our communities, in terms of rural inequity and in terms of stackable credentials that we were prepared to be able to argue had that opportunity arisen. But as I said, it was pretty uneventful in the legislature when it passed.
Thank you, Landon. That's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes it's such a battle, and other times it's just not. Speaking of battles, Rick?
Sure. So I have a very similar story from my colleagues, Landon and Jamilyn. We had a big legislative piece, Senate Bill 135, that really had our public partners at the 4-year center really up in arms. But I really wanted to add to the conversation about all the legwork that has been done to get to these points. So I have a colleague on this call from Rose State College in Lima. That school had done a lot of work with their legislative representatives. And it just so happens currently, both the House and the Senate are led by those representatives. So this is a long game that has been really nurtured. And then the OACC had invited the Ohio Hospital Association to do a summit with the community college healthcare leadership. So we have nurtured this constant dialogue about what the needs were, what the workforce ramifications were going to be. And then everything came together this year, as my colleagues were talking about. That same kind of thing happened in Ohio. While all the fuss was going on with the Senate Bill 135, they put through the nursing, the BSN language into the budget bill, right? So that was an excellent way, but we have strong work being done by our leadership at OACC that are really involved in that deep level of advocacy at the State House. So it really made a big difference for that long-term work, the long-term conversations we've been having, and the increased help from the community college group saying to business and industry partners, we need your voice. We need you to speak to our legislators. We need some really important evidence out there so that we're not looking like a power grab, but we're not looking like what we do at community colleges is build workforce solutions. So I think that played an important role in this.
Thank you, Rick. This is really a workbook and how to get this done. What you're hearing from our panelists today, and one of the things that I hear really loud and clear is it takes a long time to nurture these relationships. I mean, even though in Washington, industry brought it forward because of the relationships that you all have been building. And Landon, the seeds that you all have been planting over the years. And Rick, the same thing. You've mentioned Aurora before, how they had done such a great job with their legislative delegation. So it's just, a constant relationship building and proving what community colleges can do for their communities. The other thing that I keep hearing is rural, meeting the needs of our rural communities. And that's something else that is so critical. So the question, do you think that probably all of this is true, it's that it's tied to economic development, it's tied to social justice, tied to equity? Jamilyn, could you respond to that or talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So yes, and yes to all of what
Yes, yes, and yes.
So in taking a look at the legislation, I talked a little bit about how industry was saying we have so many jobs, we have 24,000 jobs, we don't have enough people who have the credentials to step into those roles. We have to do something better. And so the legislature also found that in taking a look at like data, that of about 1,800 jobs, 1,890 jobs, computer science degrees that were awarded in Washington State. And this is going back to looking at 2018, 2019 data, that only 3.8% were awarded to African-American students, 5.6% to Hispanic students, and less than 1% to Native American students. So given that, within the scope of this bill, the legislation really called out, hey, we need to do better. And not only do we need a workforce, period, but we need a more equitable, racially diverse workforce. We don't see that representation there. And of course, our students, all residents who are interested in this pathway could benefit for making the wages that computer science graduates make. So within the scope of this legislation, it specifically calls out the fact that, yes, we want community colleges, our community colleges in the state, to build these programs. And in doing so, we want to make sure that you are really focused on two areas. The first, they talked about low income. Low income within the scope of this bill is mentioned, I think, twice. Building capacity for students of color is mentioned at least 6 times. And so there's a charge, the conversation from industry, the charge from legislature, the legislative bodies. I'm putting an S behind that because it went through 100% almost. And then the work that we're doing in the state. And so that really aligns with the work that we are focused on in Washington State. We've done some really great work over the last 2-3 years around guided pathways. And within the scope of guided pathways, there's a huge aspect of our focus on equity. And our colleges have really been held accountable to that. The plans that they turn in, the funding that they receive, and now all colleges in our sector, all 34 colleges receive funding. And so there's a level of accountability, even if you don't think that you want to. If you're taking this money and doing this work, then there's a responsibility. And we also have a vision statement in the state. I'm going to read it to you. I probably, if Mike's out there, he might be able to find it for me. But it's the vision statement is leading with racial equity. This is the state board vision statement for our 34 colleges. And leading with racial equity, our colleges maximize student potential and transform lives within the culture of belonging that advances racial, social, and economic justice in service to our diverse communities. So that's a vision statement. That vision statement is from the board of State Board and Community Technical Colleges, embraced by our top person, Chancellor at the state board. And then the vision is meant to inspire us, to challenge us, and to capture the heart of the mission, which is to build capacity and strength for the students of Washington State to earn, graduate and earn, wages that are commensurate with living the lifestyle that we need, that we have today. So there's a lot that went into it, but the legislation really mirrors our vision and our mission, and vice versa. And we're really excited about it. The last thing I'll say in this regard is, how does that play out as far as the development of, once we move towards implementation, the application process? We've changed the application process. Both of the, it's a 2-step process, actually 3-step. There's a notification that comes first, then there's a statement of need, which is like a 20-page research document. Then there's a proposal, which is another 30 pages, industry-based, supply, demand, and what have you. And they've both been updated with new questions. There's a 7th and an 8th, respectively, to those application processes that really focus on equity and an implementation plan. So you've answered all of the other questions. We're no longer going to allow you to dance around this whole piece around leading with racial equity. We want to know, what is your plan for recruiting, retaining, supporting, and helping to move into internships and jobs within the scope of this industry. So those are some things that are happening, very much social justice driven, very much economically driven as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jamilyn. And Mike, if you're out there, can you put those percentages that Jamilyn spoke about?
I will say that those percentages can be found in the bill. So that is posted. And thanks, Mike. He did put the vision statement there as well. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Mike. Oh, that was wonderful. So Landon, do you think your legislative expansion has its roots in economic development, equity, social justice? Where do you think the roots for this expansion?
I want to turn into a participant and just listen to Jamilyn the rest of the time. Because it just feels like, I've quickly clicked on that link with and it wasn't just the system vision statement. You had a whole page on DEI and the work around that in the system. And I'll say this for Colorado, that when we went through the BSN legislation, it very much was part of our argument because of who we serve in our communities. And we talked about it in the frame of students of color, low income and first generation students. We also talked about it in relation to military students, because we have a large number of military bases in the state of Colorado, and how do we better serve our military and veterans. And we talked about it in the frame of rural inequities that existed. And that was important for us to be able to frame it this way. One, because we believe it, our board believes it, our chancellor believes it, I believe it, and our presidents believe it. But the other part of it is it's who we serve at our community colleges. We serve the majority of students of color in the state, and first generation and low income students. We serve close to 10,000 veterans or active military in the state. And half of our colleges are located in rural communities. So it was important for us to be able to talk about the inequities that exist on all of those fronts. And frankly, we have a wide range of political views in our legislature as well. And it was important for us to be able to speak to those differing views in order to get this legislation passed. But we also talked about economic development. So I mentioned in the case of the BSN, the nursing program, that was a little bit easier to articulate because the nursing shortage that existed in Colorado and still does. As we talked about the BAS the first time in 2014, it was a very similar argument around economic development, that we are located in close proximity to our workforce and community partners. And because of the stackable nature of our degrees, we could have many students who would come in, get a certificate, continue working while they went on and got their associate, continue working while they went on and got their bachelor's degree. So we made a number of arguments, both in the frame of equity and in the frame of economic development, in order to move our programs forward.
Thank you, Landon. That is really, I keep hearing the same values coming up. Rural opportunities for all of our students, all of our citizens, economic development, all of these things go into your strong proposals, and making sure that everybody has an opportunity so that our communities can be strengthened. Rick, how about you?
What I think I have to add here, so this was a year where we got the BSN, so a big part of that was looking at workforce data and really pointing out that the number of graduates from all of the sectors, public, private, and 2- and 4-year, were not meeting the needs, right? And then you throw a pandemic on top of all of that, and caregiver burnout and retirements happening at a much faster rate, really creating some clear concern amongst the hospital folks. And not only are we serving diverse populations, our healthcare agencies serve diverse populations, and they want to see a workforce that is a mirror image of the clientele that they take care of. So they are strong advocates for us to make sure that we're doing, and we do a great job, as my colleagues pointed out, of taking care of all those folks that have all these reasons why a distance 4-year college is not a likely solution for them. So playing an important role of really bringing that social justice piece into it because of industry sector needs.
For so many reasons, Rick, thank you. We really can't afford to leave anybody behind in this economy. I mean, we could probably list 100 reasons and probably just scratch the surface. So thank you for your work. So the question I have also is, what are the expectations in terms of the colleges that you all work with? Are they thinking they're going to move forward and do more of these degrees? Are they hanging back? What's the temperature there, Jamilyn?
Sure, that with the recent legislation, colleges will be eligible to apply as of December 1st of this year, 2021. So the legislation went into effect, I believe it was July 25th. So that was like, it's a good thing. Of course, behind the scenes, now that we have that legislation, we've been building the infrastructure. And part of that was really getting a feel for who would be interested in applying and how soon they would be. So we surveyed our 34, actually, I'm going to say 33, even though we're 34, we're going to leave Bellevue because they already have it,
because
right?
they
The
already did it.
legislation does say this is not applicable to you. You're already doing this thing, right? So the rest of the 33 colleges, State Board, I surveyed them to say, okay, this is what's going on. What say you? Who's interested? And if you are interested, would you be interested in offering the program as an independent college, or would you prefer to do it as a consortium? And so we got feedback of the 33 colleges, 20 colleges responded. Of the 20, 16 said that they were interested, immediately interested. And of the 16, I believe 3 or 4 said that they would be interested in applying independently. So I'll talk first about the independent colleges because that's a simpler one, kind of, in that the application process that we have in place will be very similar to what they've applied to in the past with the Bachelor of Applied Science. So we've added that additional equity question in there. And so those colleges will be able to apply. The one thing that they have to make a decision about, independent colleges and consortium colleges, but again, talking mostly about independent colleges. And when I say independent, I don't mean independent of the system. I mean that they are submitting an application as a sole entity as opposed to being in a consortia, okay? So those colleges need to also determine whether or not they are going to have a 2+2 model, meaning students earn their 2-year associate's degree and then they transition or have the opportunity to apply to another 2 years to earn their 4-year. Or are colleges interested in running a more 4-year type of model? We recommend the former as opposed to the latter. It's a lot simpler and easier because it does mirror what we do with our applied baccalaureate degree process. But we have at least one college who's on the fence, like, oh, we kind of want to run it like this. So those colleges, all of them will have to go through the application process. They will need to talk directly with State Board. I will review the application. It will go through our processes, which include board approval, State Board approval. There's also conversation that we will need to have with our other 2-year and 4-year partners to put them on notice as to how colleges are progressing. Then we have on the other side, we have colleges who have indicated they want to participate as part of a consortium. And that's a lot more challenging. And that's the part that we're still building because it's not just about applying, as one entity. Now you have to figure out partnerships, right? We're not assigning partners. They will need to decide that. Are you looking at urban rural? Are you looking regional colleges? How will you make the decision as to who you will partner with? My expectation will be that I will see that in the scope of the application and that I will continue to have conversations with those partners, those partners. There's taking a look at, what are you sharing? Are we looking at shared faculty and curriculum? Will you have meetings and who is facilitating those meetings? What does the financial or the fiscal aspect of it look like? And also taking a look at enrollment and coding. So those are the things that we're kind of putting together right now, and we'll need to get out to those colleges relatively soon. And I'll round out the conversation by saying that I'm working very closely with a steering committee. We have a statewide steering committee comprised of community college leaders, vice presidents of instruction, deans and directors, industry partners. We have a Center of Excellence. We have representation from the Center of Excellence, and then also MESA, which is a group that will help us as far as recruiting and building capacity for building pathways for students of color in particular. So there's a lot going on,
Jamilyn.
but the expectation is that
This is where
colleges
you're
are
glad
going
you're
to
not Jamilyn.
Yeah. The expectation is that colleges are going to apply and that we will help to the degree that we are expected to help lift them.
Thank you, Jamilyn. Landon, what about expectations for the colleges in Colorado? What do you think they're thinking?
Yeah, the timing of your question is good, and it's not too dissimilar from what you just heard. Since the legislation just was signed in May, we had a retreat in July of our vice presidents, and then the presidents they're doing a retreat today and tomorrow. And part of what we've come up with in our system is we've got a bit of a framework for some expectations of how we're going to roll these bachelor degrees out. We essentially want colleges to work together. Now, there will be some programs that might only be one college here or there, but for many of them, in business administration, construction management, teacher prep, some of these other ones, there's going to be multiple colleges. And our expectation is that they do work together because we want to have the same program requirements from college to college. That way, if a student were to transfer or to move in from one college to another, they don't have to start over or take additional credits. And so it is our expectation that colleges work together in their design. And we do have common course numbering in the state. So we've already got the foundation for that. We've got common courses. We're looking for these bachelor's degrees to also be common. But we've got a few other characteristics that we're expecting. We want to make sure that our programs are stackable where that makes sense. We want to make sure that they're industry aligned, and that in some cases, when a student completes a BAS degree, they might also have 2 or 3 industry credentials that they earned along the way. We want our programs to be parallel to non-credit so that there's a pathway for a student who may have taken a course or two in the non-credit space, but they would be able to have it move into the credit space. We want to have prior learning assessment friendly programs so that a student coming from industry with, let's say, 30 hours of industry certified experience can translate that into credit. And then the last thing is we want to make sure that our programs are distinguishable from like university programs. We're not going to be able to compete with our flagship universities straight up in business or some of these other programs. And so, yes, we can compete on price because we're significantly lower, but we also want to make sure we have accelerated programming, industry aligned programming. We want to make sure that we make use of open educational resources and have a very applied learning and competency-based learning approach. And so these are some of the principles that we're talking about as we start to move forward. And then the last thing I would say is we have 2 consortia being formed in Colorado. One is an online consortium, and the second is a rural college consortium. And so we see both of those as opportunities to be able to co-create BAS degrees and make them available more broadly, where one rural college may not be able to do a BAS on their own, but our 6 rural colleges together very certainly could. And so it's also an expectation that our BASs are part of these rural consortium, which is why they need to be the same and not different in terms of degree requirements.
Thank you, Lena. That's fabulous. This is, just so exhilarating to hear how all of these things we've been talking about for years, guided pathways and experiential learning and stackable credentials, are kind of coming together in this community college baccalaureate degree. Really, I know this is going to sound corny, but it's giving me like kind of goosebumps that you all are doing such beautiful, beautiful work. So Rick, how about you?
Sure, I just want to address Steve's question about the ADN to BSN. So in Ohio, the legislation was very specific that we had to be a degree completer. So it would take associate degree students on into a bachelor degree opportunity. So very specific. And we do have some funding perks for baccalaureate degree courses. And so all those courses are in those baccalaureate degree programs. So there is some funding, but we're a fully performance-based funding state. So it is a little bit, but we are going to get less funding than any of the the four-year institutions for sure. I think important in the legislation of this year, from what we're talking about, is in the original legislation that the language said the chancellor may consider these baccalaureate degree proposals. In this budget bill for the BSN, they actually said the chancellor shall approve. So our institutions we have 22 of the 23 community colleges offer the ADN, and we have about 10 of the 22 currently interested in giving some consideration to a BSN proposal. So those institutions' proposals have to be well written, meet HLC requirements, our institutional accreditation, plus their own nursing program accreditation standards. So if all those things are in place, then the legislation says the chancellor shall approve. So that sort of sets the stage for what we think will be a straightforward process, but we are expecting to see opposition. So the original legislative, the rules process had public hearings where a lot of bashing happened. Now this is all done online, but they're expecting to see the significant pushback. We saw that at the before the bill was approved. The private sector universities really came out in force and said some horrific things. So we do, our constituency group is ready for that kind of language, and they're preparing themselves well to stay to the message about what was really successful in the legislation being approved, that there's room for all of us, that we're not trying to take anything away from our four-year brethren. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible, provide opportunity for as many people as we can, and really focus on workforce needs. So that's an important part of our message, and making sure in this leg of this new legislation that's crystal clear to everybody and clear in their proposals, so that when that opposition does come up, that we're ready with the answer already.
Thank you, Rick. Really great. The data from Washington and Florida, I think, shows that university enrollments continue to increase, even though the community college baccalaureates field for field are offered. So why don't we see if we can take some questions? We only have 7 more minutes. So Shelley, do you have some questions there that have come up that you think the group can address? Oh, let's see. There's one right here. Hold on. What state does offer the BAT degree? Oh, Washington State does offer that. Okay, so Jamilyn, that was you. Are there any other questions that are out there in the chat land? So I've got a question for you all. Is there one takeaway that you would like to share with our participants as you think about your journey over the past year or so on this? Rick, you're shaking your head. So is there one takeaway you have?
Yeah, I think the long-term game that you're all been playing, or maybe that needs to be stepped up if you haven't thought about it, but I think all of your institutions need to be very close to their legislators, and as well as that workforce development, making sure that the industry sector that you're going after is encouraged to become vocal with those legislators as well. So you want to make sure that you're able to shine lots of light on the reasons why you want to do this. And it's all about helping our communities, not some kind of power grab that we want to take, become a four-year institution, or all those things that will be said about you. But I think that long haul game of really developing relationships is really an important part of what happened in Ohio's success.
Thank you. Thank you. Landon, do you have anything you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I would double down on what Rick just said. I think it's really critical to have those partnerships prior to moving in. But the biggest question in Colorado, and this could very well be the state in other, or the question in other states, really came from our university partners. And I don't remember. I think it was Jamilyn who mentioned it at the beginning that this is one pathway. We did
Right.
not eliminate our university pathways when we created our BSN or our BAS degrees, and we don't intend to do so in the future. There are plenty of students who still want to transfer to our public universities. And this is about creating an additional pathway. And we feel very confident that without this pathway, we have students who aren't going anywhere. Or maybe they're making some decisions to go into, not-for-profit or proprietary institutions that may or may not be the best choice. And so this is about expanding pathways and opportunities. And so even though it was controversial with our universities, we still very much are strong partners with our universities. So I think any way that you can try to alleviate some of the concerns of the universities, that study that you mentioned, Angela, out of Florida, was one that's really, really been enlightening for us. And we've talked about that verbally with some of our legislators, that the community college degrees don't harm enrollment at the public universities, at least not in Florida, and we would make the assumption they won't in Colorado either. So I guess
But not
just a couple of
Washington either.
yeah. So just those couple of points I think were important to consider.
Thank you, Landon. And Jamilyn, something you'd like to leave us with?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say what a great opportunity for the to be on the same platform with Richard and Landon. I've learned a lot. I've been writing down my notes on the side here as well. So I'm going to say ditto and ditto to what they just said. And then I would be remiss to not add in the conversation around building equitable pathways, really leaning into equity in all ways, shapes, and means. But like looking at the data with Washington State in particular, oftentimes looking at racial equity, it gets lost in the scope of other things that we have conversations about. It's a hard conversation to have sometimes when you're talking about equity. And I think that we need to put at the forefront, when we're talking about equity, racial equity is imperative in some of the conversations that we're having. It can be challenging, but not to step back from that. And that is not to put light on other types of equity, but time and time again, the data tends to reflect that when we look at leading with a lens towards racial equity, that we really are not bridging those gaps. So I agree wholeheartedly with what Landon and Richard have said, and I will add that to the conversation. And then above and beyond that, I think that we are all doing some really fabulous work. I know my constituents at the colleges in Washington State, man, they work hard and they're doing some really great stuff. And we would not be where we are with applied baccalaureate degrees or moving into this brand new frontier with Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. Bellevue College, I know, but in the broader sense. So I'm really proud of them. And I think that we need to also celebrate those opportunities and celebrate it broadly, not just within the community college system. Our communities at large and industry partners need to continue to know the great work that we're doing. So that's what I would add.
Thank you. I don't think I could have scripted anything better. You all have been just wonderful on so many levels. I just want to remind everyone that we can continue this conversation. Hopefully you'll continue it with us in Tucson, Arizona, February 16th to 18th. You'll be getting invitations. We'd love to see all of you there. And I just cannot thank Jamilyn and Landon and Rick enough for the information that they've shared. I mean, this is like a fantastic course on how to get this done, how to really serve your community and those students who've been, just historically excluded from, the American dream. And so this has just been wonderful. And, the other thing I keep thinking of is this, my husband is always saying this to our kids, and I'm listening too, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so those states that think we're going to get this done this year, it may not happen this year because it takes a while. It takes a while to get this momentum, to get everybody on the train, on the bus with you. Also, this year, Texas also expanded their community college baccalaureate opportunities. Arizona, for the first time, is allowing community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees And California, the bill to allow their community colleges to offer baccalaureates, or in addition to those that are piloting it, they're on, that bill is on Governor Newsom's desk today. So Governor, if you're listening, if you're on this podcast, get that signed. I know that Constance Carroll will be really happy if you did it, as well as the rest of the California system. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart. You just did a beautiful, wonderful, awesome job. Thank you, each and every one of you. And thank you, participants, for staying with us and giving us your trust for an hour. Thank you all, and take care. Bye-bye.